Answer without using the calculator. 0.009 times 0.07. Let's have you try this one out, and if you get stuck, don't worry, we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so for a question like this, my approach to doing this would be to first just think about what is 9 times 7. All right, so just ignore the decimals and the zeros and just think first, what's 9 times 7? Well, 9 times 7 is 63. So now what I want you to do is count up all of the digits to the right of the decimal points. So if I look at 0.009 and I count 1, 2, 3. So there are 3 digits to the right of the decimal point here for this first number. Now for this number here to the right of the decimal, I see 1, 2, 2 different digits. All right, so 3 plus 2 is 5. So I count up how many digits there are to the right of the decimal points. I see that there were 5 digits here total to the right of the decimal points. So I go back to that 63, and I know that my answer needs to have 5 different digits in it to the right of the decimal point. So here I go 63. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So see how I use zeros here? I start with that 63, and I keep adding zeros until I have 5 digits total to the right of my decimal, and this corresponds to answer C. So I know I went over this a little bit quickly, so here's a written solution. I typed this out for you to help you understand this. You can pause the video, take all the time you need to study the solution, and when you're ready, we'll go on to the next question. If the ratio of boys to girls in a classroom is 5 to 6, and there are 12 girls, how many boys are there? Is the answer A, B, C, D, or is it E? So now would be a good time to pause the video, try this question out, and if you get stuck, as always, don't worry. This is just for practice right now. I don't care if you get it right or wrong. It's all about the knowledge. Okay, let's break down how to do this. So there are several ways to look at this question, as there are with many questions in math, but let me show you what I think is the most simple way to do it. So we know that here there are 5 boys for every 6 girls, because the ratio of boys to girls is 5 to 6. So from that, I can write out a fraction. So B over G, where the B stands for boys and the G is for girls, equals 5 over 6, right? Because the ratio of boys to girls, the boys, it's 5, the girls, it's 6. It's a 5 to 6 ratio. Now, we're told that there are 12 girls, so really I can come down here and I can plug 12 into the equation for G. All right, so let me show you what that's going to look like. So B, if I rewrite, I'll have B over 12 equals 5 over 6. Now, I want to figure out how many boys there are. And to do that, I need to get this B by itself on one side of the equation. So if I have B divided by 12, what's my next move going to be here? Well, if it's B divided by 12, to get rid of this 12 here, I have to multiply by 12. And if I do that, they're going to cancel out. Now, whatever you do to one side, you also have to do it to the other. Okay, so I have to multiply this side by 12. Now, you're more than welcome to just throw this in your calculator here. If you want to, you can do it by hand. You can do it in your head if you're so inclined to do so. However you want to do it, you'll find that the answer here is 10. All right, the answer here is D, 10. So let me show you the written solution here. I typed this out for you. You can pause the video, take all the time you need to study this, and then when you're ready, we'll move on to the next question. Calculate the volume of the rectangular prism below, where each dimension is measured in centimeters. This is a 10, this is a 5, this is a 9, and I just like to read these out in case you're on a cell phone or another small screen device and it's hard to see. So let's have you pause the video and note here, I gave you the formula of the volume of a rectangular prism just to save you some time here. On the test, you're going to have to look this up on the formula sheet. So let's have you pause the video, give this one a try, and then we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so basically here, what we need to do is we're just going to use this formula here. All right, so we are going to do 5 times 9 times 10. Now, sometimes people get confused, well, which one's the length, which one is the width here? Okay, it doesn't really matter, honestly, like the difference doesn't matter that much. You just have to multiply all three numbers that you're given here. All right, so don't worry too much because it's going to be the same. Whether you do 9 times 5 or 5 times 9, it's exactly the same either way. So don't stress out about that. But basically, you plug this in your calculator, 5 times 9 times 10, or do it by hand if you want to. I wouldn't recommend on your test doing things by hand when you don't have to, just for the sake of time. I think it's easier to plug it into your calculator, but that's up to you to make that decision. But either way, the answer here is B. So let me show you the written solution that I wrote for this question here, and you can pause the video as always, take all the time you need with it, and when you're ready, we'll move on to the next question. So this video's first champion shoutout goes to Cam, who has now had 4 unsuccessful attempts at taking GED math. And I know that whenever people fail the test even one time, it can be really demoralizing, it can be stressful, it can be really frustrating, which is perfectly understandable why you feel that way here, let alone 4 tries. So I just wanted to say that, you know, I really admire your perseverance here, that you're not giving up, and I just want to let you know, and anyone out there that's struggling and has maybe failed the test before and is still sticking with it here, that, you know, we're all in this together, and I know it's hard right now, but we want to get you through this and get you ahead to the next phase in your life. I also wanted to give a shout out to Naomi, who just passed GED math super quickly after just studying for 3 weeks, which is really fast, and passed on her first try. So I just wanted to share Naomi's experience here as well, and congratulate Naomi for her fantastic work. Consider the numbers negative 0.00765, negative 0.0234, negative 0.999, and negative 0.0765. Which answer choice correctly shows these numbers ordered from largest to smallest? So let's have you pause the video, try this question out, take your time with this, and when you're ready, we'll go over how to do it. And as always, don't worry if you get it right or wrong. We're just here to practice and learn and get better. Okay, so let's talk about this question. So there are a few principles to understand here. If I were to give you a 5 and an 8, and I were to ask you which number is the largest here, all right, you'd probably know right away off the top of your head, well, 8 is obviously bigger than 5. But if I were to reverse it, if I were to say, here's negative 5, and here's negative 8, all right, and I were to ask you which one's bigger, hopefully you would know that negative 5 is bigger than negative 8, all right? So it can be kind of confusing sometimes because normally we would think of 8 as a bigger number than 5, but when we have negative signs here, it changes the game up completely, all right? So let me show you why just briefly here, all right? So if I have 0, if I have a number line, all right, and I go negative 1 and negative 2, all right, negative 1 is closer to 0 than negative 2, all right? Negative 1 is actually a bigger number than negative 2. Negative 2 is a smaller number, okay? So that's the first thing that you have to understand. And the second thing you have to understand is a little bit about ranking decimals. So if I have 0.1, 0.1 is greater than 0.01, which is greater than 0.001. So hopefully you understand that. Now, if I put negative signs in here, it actually switches the entire thing up here. So if I do negative 0.001, that's actually a bigger number than negative 0.01, which is a greater number than negative 0.1. All right, and so basically you just have to kind of understand these two ideas here and just kind of reason your way through it. And you'll see that B is the correct answer. And I think questions like this are deceptively simple because it seems like it should be easier than it actually is, but it can be tricky sometimes, just my opinion here. So I'm going to show you the written solution, but first let me just point out that the next question coming up here is the Champions Challenge question for the video. The Champions Challenge question is just kind of something I do for fun here in these videos where out of all the problems I pick out the one that, in my opinion, is the hardest question. And so the next question here, in my opinion, is going to be the hardest one in this video so far. Some people might have different opinions, and that's fine. But basically, I don't want you to worry about the number because the numbers are out of order. So if you look at the next question, I think it's number 87 or something. So don't wonder why it's not 92 because I did that one out of order. So just a heads up there. So let me show you the written solution for this question number 91. You can pause the video, take all the time that you need, and then when you're ready, you can go ahead to that Champions Challenge question. What are the y and x values for the following system? X plus 50 equals 2y, and 2x equals negative y. So if you'd like to, now would be a good time to pause the video, try this question out, and then if you get stuck, no worries, because we're just going to go over how to do it. Okay, so let's talk about this. So for system of equations questions, all right, there are multiple ways to approach them. I'm going to show you the first method here, which is what I call the substitution method. So basically, what you want to do for this method is pick one equation. Let me call this equation 1 and equation 2. Okay, and so basically, you want to solve for either x, pick one of the equations, and solve it for x or y. Okay, so I'm going to take this equation 1, I'm going to solve this for x. So since it's x plus 50, I'm going to subtract by 50 on both sides of the equation, and that's going to let me get x by itself on one side of the equation. All right, so when I say solve for x, all I mean is we want to get x by itself on one side of the equation. All right, so if I do that, I would have x equals 2y minus 50. All right, so again, let me just recap this here. I have x plus 50 equals 2y. So I'm going to start with this first equation here, and I want to solve it for x. In other words, I want to get x by itself on both sides of the equation. All right, and since it's x plus 50, I want to subtract 50 because the 50s will cancel out. But whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other side. So that's how I ended up with x equals 2y minus 50. All right, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. So I have x equals 2y minus 50. So I'm going to come down here to my second equation, and I'm going to take all of this here, this 2y minus 50, and I'm going to substitute it into the equation in place of the x here. Okay, so if this is confusing, don't worry, because this is tricky for a lot of students. And so let me just break this down nice and slow here so that you can understand how this works. Okay, so all I did again, I took the first equation, I rearranged it to get x by itself. Okay, and then I came down here into the second equation, and I took this x and I replaced it with 2y minus 50. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And so all I did was this right here, this right here, this is just my equation 2, everything that I just wrote out here. I just took this equation 2, this 2x equals negative y, and I rewrote it, and instead of writing an x, I wrote 2y minus 50 because we figured out that x equals 2y minus 50. So hopefully this makes sense. So now what I want to do is I want to figure out what y is. So I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to do what's called distributing. So I'm first going to multiply the 2 by 2y. So what is 2 times 2? 2 times 2 is 4, and I want to bring the y along for the ride. So I want to take this 2 and distribute it to this minus 50 here. So what is 2 times negative 50? 2 times negative 50 is negative 100. All right, and this is equal to negative y. And remember, the goal here is to figure out what y equals. So I have 4y minus 100 equals negative y. So again, there's multiple ways to approach this here, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this 4y here, since it's positive 4y, and I'm going to subtract 4y from this side of the equation. Now, why would I do that? Well, the reason I want to do that is because the 4y's will cancel out. But in math, whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other, so I'm also going to have to subtract 4y from this side. All right, so think of this like negative 1y minus 4y. Well, that is going to give me negative 5y. So I can rewrite this as negative 100 equals negative 5y. All right, and so now what I can do to get this y, since negative 5y is the same as negative 5 times y, I want to do the opposite operation of multiplication, which is division. All right, so I want to, in other words, divide by negative 5 on both sides of the equation. So if I do that, I have to do negative 100 divided by negative 5. And so the answer for y is y equals 20. So I did all this work to figure out that y is equal to 20. Okay. So now what I want to do to find x is I want to come back up here, and I can pick either equation 1 or equation 2. It does not matter, whichever one jumps out at you as being easier to do this with. I'm going to take equation 2 in this case, and now I'm going to take this y, and I'm going to replace it with 20. So I have 2x equals negative y, and so y is 20, so I put a negative 20 right here. And I want to figure out what x is. So what I have to do is, since it's 2x, I have to divide by 2. Now, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 times x is just x. And whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other side as well. So if I rewrite this, I'll have x equals negative 10. Now, you might be wondering, do I really have to go through all of these steps? Well, if you're using the substitution method that I'm showing you, unfortunately, yes, you do have to go through all of these steps. Now, I am explaining this slowly, hopefully to make it more understandable. All right, so that's why I'm talking so slowly. I mean, you could, in theory, plug the stuff in your calculator, be done in a minute or so if you really know what you're doing. So just because it took me a long time to explain this, I'm doing this for instructional purposes. Once you know what you're doing, it doesn't take that long to do this in a calculator or in your head. But now I'm going to show you the speed run way to do it, okay? So the faster way to do it. So I'm going to clear all of this out of the road. We already found that the answer is C. Okay, but I'm going to show you the faster way to do this here. And you might be wondering, well, why didn't you just show us that to begin with? Well, the reason is because the faster way can be trickier, all right? The substitution method is slow. It has more steps, but it's pretty straightforward, at least in my opinion. All right, it's a pretty straightforward method to do it, whereas if you do it the other way I'm going to show you, the kind of speed run version, this is a little bit trickier, but it'll get you the answer way faster. So basically, what I want to do here is the way I would do this, and again, there's other ways to do it. You want to look for a way that you can have the same number and letter in both equations, but with opposite signs. Okay. So in other words, if I have this 2y right here, and I have this negative y right here, if I multiply everything in this equation by 2, that's going to give me negative 2y down here. And then I can add up the two equations, and the y's are going to cancel out. So you might be wondering, what in the heck are you talking about? All right, so let me show you. And I'm going to rewrite this instead of x plus 50. I'm going to write this as 50 plus x. It's the same as saying x plus 50. All right, equals 2y. Okay, so now remember here, what I did was I'm going to multiply everything in this equation by 2. So 2 times 2x is going to give me 4x, and 2 times negative y is negative 2y. Okay, and so now all I have to do is add both of these equations up. And I'll show you why I'm doing this here in just a second, if you're not sure why. So 50 plus 0 is just 50. So the 50 really doesn't change. The 50 just kind of comes straight down here, all right? And x plus 4x is going to be 5x. Now, what is 2y plus negative 2y? In other words, 2y minus 2y. Well, that equals 0. So see how just by making that one change, just by multiplying this by 2, I can, set this up so that the y's are going to cancel out. And now what I would do is I would subtract, and there's several ways to do this, but I would subtract by 5x if this were my test, because these 5x's will cancel out, and that gives me 50 equals negative 5x. Then all we have to do is divide by negative 5 on both sides of the equation, and that's going to give me negative 10 equals x. So now that I know that negative 10 equals x, all I have to do is I just take this negative 10 and I substitute it into either of the equations for x, all right? And that's going to help me find what y is. So let me show you. So I do 2 times negative 10 equals negative y. All right, so 2 times negative 10 is negative 20. If I have negative 20 equals negative y, what I can do is I can kind of cancel the negative on both sides here, and that leaves me with 20 equals y. So there you go. That's the speed run way to do it. The only thing about this is like it can be a little bit hard to set this up here. This case worked out really well because all I had to do was multiply everything in equation 2 by 2. That let me cancel out my y's, okay? But you're not always going to have something this easy to make a change like that too. So whichever method you like better, you know, stick with that method. The first method may take you longer, but I think it's more straightforward. But let me show you the written solution. I can't fit the written solution for both steps on the screen here, so I'm just going to show you this one here.